Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is Rose Lemonade Tea by Taylor's of Harrogate and Herbal Tea, which I mostly drink nowadays. And I am having it in this small cup for two reasons. One, because anything citrusy I'm supposed to have only in small portions nowadays. Lovely. And also because I wanted to show you one of my cups that I bought around about 1995 because I thought it would be in theme with what I'm talking about today. And but unfortunately I can't turn it around because my fingers are a little weak, so I'm not going to be holding it up too long. Anyway, also I wanted to just in advance apologize for the sound of the air conditioner. Even if I didn't drink hot tea right now, it's just a little bit too hot and humid out to not have some form of air conditioning. As it is, I have it on the lightest setting, or in the mildest setting, so it's just keeping me from, being too hot. Lovely again. But it's the summer. There's not much I could do about how the summer is. Anyway, what I'm talking about today is a chat tea time. I call it that because it sounds like being chatty, but I'm also talking about, well, I think you get the idea. And I haven't done one of these in a while, and I haven't done a post in a while, so I thought I would combine both things. Maybe I want to do some more of these chat tea times because I like to just ramble on a little bit about certain things and not maybe get too organized and too technical about anything. So this isn't like a deep history lesson or anything like that, but I thought I would talk a little bit about a year that affects a lot of Jane Austen fans. And it's not the year that she was born, even though that's a big anniversary this year, 250 years. Of course, that's important, I'm sure, but for a lot of other purposes, 1995 was a huge year. So I'm going to talk about how it affected me as, solidified me basically as what do they call it? Janeite, Austenite, whichever one you choose. And also as a British tea time person. Even though I already was both of these things to a point, I think 95 really did it for me. And some of these things that I'm going to talk about are going to probably leak into 1996. But I'm just gonna kind of, like I said, be a little bit loose about my time here because, come on. I mean, really. But and also because you see we're living in a time now when films come out, when TV shows come out, they pretty shortly after come out around the world. If it comes out in the UK, it comes out in the US, usually not too long afterwards. Still sometimes releases take time between, and unless you have a good VPN setup, it's kind of hard to see certain things when you want to see them. But back then, way back then in 1995, if something came out in the UK, it usually took a little longer to come out in the United States, and then if it came out on VHS, it took even longer to see it. Whatever. But so what I'm going to talk about is a few, first of all, mainly some things that I did that year, and also some things that came out that affected me. Now I'm going to get one out of the way that actually at the time did nothing for me, although it did a lot of things for people who either weren't into Jane Austen before and now were as a result, or already liked it, and like I said, for them would have solidified. And that is the 1995 release of the was it 6-part Pride and Prejudice that came out in 1995. So it was a big hit. A lot of people watched it and said, wow, I want to know more about Jane Austen, and what else did she write, and what other films are there out there. And so it went. I'm sure you can find a lot of people of my age range who would say, my age range, I'm only one age, but anyway, that would say, oh yeah, I'd heard about Jane Austen, or we read her in school, but it wasn't until I saw that I really wanted to watch more or read more or whatever. So great. But I have to say that affected me not at all at the time, because I didn't get to watch it until many years later. And there's a lot of people who will say, well, if you really like something, you'll find a way. Oh, you'll find a way. But there really wasn't a way to find for me. It was a different time, and there were a lot of things I did to try to get a hold of certain things. For instance, I was also really into certain British rock groups that had come out earlier, and I used to go to these record stores in Greenwich Village and Manhattan and get all these bootleg VHSs to watch some old videos that there was no other way to get them, or concerts that were recorded and that you couldn't see in any other way. And now you could go on YouTube and pretty much see all of these things. But back then, not so much. But I don't think these record stores and these, video type stores had a lot of bootleg Jane Austen stuff, unless I'm completely wrong, which is entirely possible. I was in college at the time, and I didn't also have a lot of money to be spending on tons of things. And my family did not have cable. I'm saying that because, well, the BBC, I think it was the BBC, I believe it was the BBC, but anyway, don't quote me on that, released Pride and Prejudice in, I believe, the summer of 95. And it came out in the United States in 96, but not only did it come out in 96, but it was released on a channel called A&E, which, as I didn't have cable in my home, I didn't have access to it, and I didn't know anyone else at the time who had cable who could record it for me, and I probably didn't even know that it was being released at that time, so there was just no way. And it just kind of got away from me until quite a few years later, when I was having a conversation with a friend, and we were talking about Jane Austen, and she said, oh, I love, the one in 95, etc. And I said, well, I've never seen it. She said, are you really? So I finally saw it, and then of course I loved it, and I couldn't believe it took me so long. So I can't really speak to that as being affected by that. My interest in Jane Austen was not moved at all by that film, unfortunately, or TV show. I call it a film. I don't know why, even though it's not quite, but whatever. Speaking of whatever, there's another important one, and this is Emma related, and that is Clueless. So I believe also in the summer of 95, the film Clueless was released. And I'm not sure if I knew right away that this was based on Emma. I feel like I would have gone to see it in the theaters if it had happened, but there were a lot of things happening in the summer of 95 that might have distracted me. In fact, the year 95 had a lot of fun things that happened, but had a lot of distractions. Like I said, I was busy in school. When I got a summer to autumn internship job, it paid a little bit. I got actually really sick because I worked at an office where everybody chose to smoke in that particular office because it was technically non-smoking. So I got really sick. I got asthma and everything. And never been quite the same since. Not a fan of smoking, by the way. But also early in the year, my grandfather died. It was, a big deal in the family. So there were a lot of ups and downs in 95, but I choose, when possible, I don't want to be, nostalgic to the point of forgetting the bad things, but I choose to think of a lot of the good things that coincided with each other to make for the person I am today. And but there were things that came out that I was really into, and there were things that I read that were very important. One, of course, one of the most important ones was that I finally read Persuasion, which is now my favorite Jane Austen novel. I'd already read Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, and of course Emma, which was my first one. And so I already loved Jane Austen, but Persuasion was just one. I've said this before, but it's one of the few books that I've stayed, awake at night, well into my sleeping hours to watch. I don't do that. It's just not a me thing. And if people think you're not really a book person if you don't do that, well, I guess I'm not a real book person. But honestly, books, most of the time, even if I'm in a book that is really good, I might stay awake another hour, tops. But most of the time, if I need to get to sleep, I need to get to sleep. But I really, even though it's not a very suspenseful book, I just really needed to know what was going to happen. So that was a big deal for me. I keep saying it was a big deal, but it was. And then later on, and again, this goes into 96, but I'm going to count it anyway. When it came out, I believe it came out in the theaters, but somehow I wasn't able to see it, but a friend of mine was able to record it on her, somehow, on VHS. And she invited me over. She lived around the corner from me. And we got together a nice little tea and scones situation and watched the film with Amanda Root and Kieran Hines. I believe those are the names. And it is, I wouldn't say it's my top favorite adaptation, but it definitely is one I really love, and it is my favorite Persuasion adaptation. I don't think I've ever seen another version that I've quite, especially not the Netflix one. Oh my goodness. No, definitely not. Freddie? No. Freddie. Freddie is trying to bite my arm, which is lovely. Everything's lovely today. But you see, now we're going to get into a little bit about tea, because I must count this in a little bit, because this all goes together. The year before, I had gone to the UK for the very first time, and I loved it, and I knew there was no way I was going to get back for quite some time, because again, I was going into college. I was going to be broke for quite some time. I was not going to have a proper job for some time, and like that internship would not count as a proper job. Right, Freddie? But so I was really sorry, my cat is very distracting once again. Okay. So I was really sad because I really wanted to go back, and I didn't even have those little things that you could do now, which is like watching videos of people walking in London, or having anyway, really, except watching, TV shows or movies that took place in the UK, that I could have a little bit of an experience, but not a lot. But I certainly didn't have the food, or I mean, not that all the food's good, but some of it. The good stuff is the good stuff, and one of the best of the good stuffs, if that's English, is the tea and scones. I mean, the proper tea and the proper scones. I know that even in 1995, I was searching for scones all around, and whatever passed for scones in anywhere I went just was not. And they could be good in some places eventually. Now you go to places and you could find some decent scones, but never the ones that are made like they are in the UK. It's just different. However, a friend of ours, all these friends kind of are the same ones that I spent time with and went to see these movies and watch these shows with. They're all related, but I'm not gonna delineate everybody, because it's gonna get too long-winded here. But a friend of ours found, I suppose in the internet, because it was a printout, very early internet days for me, a list of some British places in Manhattan. And I think this was pretty early in 1995. It was still cold out, I believe. I could be wrong, but because I mix things up as well. But I remember specifically that there were two places, and one was called Tea and Sympathy, which was a tea room / restaurant, and one was a place called Myers of Keswick. I didn't know it was pronounced Keswick back then. That was a grocery store, and they are both still there. I still go to them pretty regularly whenever I get a chance. But at the time it was like, well, okay, I can't make it back over to the UK anytime soon, but this is a pretty good substitute. And it made me, because the tea and Sympathy still does the tea service, in which they serve things in a teapot with loose tea and the strainer that you put over the cup and you pour it over, so you strain out the tea leaves that come with it. If you want to, you can always just keep one strain and just deal with it, but and that was it. It just tasted so good. The scones were amazing, and then eventually I tried other things on the menu, and I tried afternoon tea, which was magnificent. And so it became a thing where I was rather obsessed with replicating that in my life, and because I knew I wasn't always going to be able to run to Tea and Sympathy every 5 minutes. I found other places that sold loose tea in the city, a pretty quick walk from that area as well. Eventually, Tea and Sympathy started selling loose tea, and you could go there as well, even now. But back then, they didn't have a shop attached to them. It was quite a different time. And so I would have to go elsewhere. I went to a place that a lot of old New Yorkers will remember, called Dean and DeLuca, which was in Soho, near the Prince Street station, in case you need directions to a place that is no longer there. On the N and R train, and W, I don't know. Back then it wasn't a W train. I don't remember. Anyway, so and they sold loose teas, and I'm pretty sure that's also where I got my own tea strainer. So I had a teapot at home that I think had been in my family, but I went to a store called Lecter's and bought a white teapot that I still have also, and then I started going to little places to get my teacups. Actually, I went to places like TJ Maxx and Marshall's, places like that, anywhere that I could find cups and saucers. And I built up a bit of a collection that is now, a little too much, but I don't miss it. And this purple, it's got a little bit of lipstick stain in it, sorry. This purple teacup is one of them. I have a number of others. At the end of the year, I went away with some friends and we went to an outlet mall. And what did I buy? A cat teapot that looked like my orange cat of that time, the pre-Freddy. His name was Cinnamon. And I got that also in 1995, in case you were wondering. So basically, these were two interests that were just on the same track with each other. And I feel like they have remained with me to this day. I do not like everything that is British. I am not into James Bond. I do not care for the sports. It just doesn't interest me. And probably there's plenty of other things. Politics really don't do it for me. I only know about the prime ministers that had something to do with the monarchs that I read about. But back then I hadn't really had much of an interest in British history, only tea history. I was reading about teas. And that's funny because when I ended up later on getting into history and rereading Jane Austen, I can actually see references that I wouldn't have understood back then. But that's another story for another time. Let's stay in 1995. But the big release that year, because Persuasion was important as far as the book that I read, and also seeing the adaptation in early '96, I believe. But the big release for me, anyway, and this actually came quite late in the year too. But this was Sense and Sensibility. Now I don't count Sense and Sensibility as my favorite. I don't know if I ever did, but it was always one of my favorites, and I still love it. I still love it very much. I love all of Jane Austen's novels. Honestly, even the worst one, to me, is still better than most other books, in my opinion. But, my goodness, that movie was such a favorite, and it still is. And I have to say, after rereading Sense and Sensibility a number of times since, yes, they left things out. Yes, they cast people who are way older to play roles. You know what I mean? Oh, this person's supposed to be 20 and they're like 40. Okay, but sometimes I feel like you have to suspend disbelief, or whatever you want to call it, because, well, a lot of these actors were also big theater folk. And when you go to see a play, you will watch people in the theater, say Shakespeare, who are like 50 years old playing a 22-year-old. And everyone just sits there and goes, hey, what a good job. Because that's how it is. In films, it's a little harder because you say, you're looking up right close to their faces and you say, this does not look like a 20-year-old. But I didn't care. I was, 19, I guess, when I saw this. And did I look at Emma Thompson and say, she's a bit old to be playing Eleanor? Did I look at Alan Rickman and say, it's a little up there? No, because I didn't care. I enjoyed it so much. And I still do. It had just the right blend of humor. It had, like I said, excellent casting. I love Mrs. Jenkins, I think her name is. If I'm forgetting her name, then I'm so sad. But anyway, and Sir John Middleton, as they're not a couple, but they're, in-laws, and they just get along so well, and they have their little jokes, and it's so silly, but it's hilarious. F major. Harriet Walter as Fanny Dashwood is one of the best things ever. The way she pronounces everything, she says, my only real concern is how long it will take them to move out. It's perfection. I still, to this day, I see her in so many different things. I even saw her in Downton Abbey. And what do I think? Sensibility. Even though she's in so many different things and is so excellent, I just loved her in that so much. When spoiler alert, when she gets the revelation from Lucy Steele, and turns on her like crazy. That is, and it didn't even happen that way in the book, and I don't care. It was wonderful. It was beautiful. The scenery was beautiful. I don't know if everything was accurate to the time. Neither do I care. It was just fantastic, and it wasn't just me. Later on, I saw this with, my sisters got into it, our friends. We watched this for years to come. When we get together, we watch it. In fact, I think it was 2005. I went to France. Our friend had moved to France after she got married, and we watched that with her in 2005 because we still loved it. I still love it now. I'll still watch it. But at the time, I saw it in the movie theater with a bunch of friends, and I was just like, I remember seeing it and thinking, oh, I know I liked Jane Austen before, but now I just love her so much. In fact, that was the year, I'm pretty sure, that I wrote a whole term paper, or whatever they called it in college. And they said, write about a specific author or director, I don't know why. And I went all over Jane Austen. And I'm so glad I did, because that got me into learning more about her as a person rather than just her writing. And so, yes, and I finished Persuasion, and I think it was in 96 that I started, it might have been the end of 95 that I started Mansfield Park, loved that, and I finished, my first run of Jane Austen novels with Northanger Abbey in the summer of 96. That's going a little too far into the future. But I saw Clueless, I mentioned Clueless before, in early 96, if I remember correctly. It was during a big snowstorm in New York, and a bunch of friends came over, and I think we made pasta, and we all sat and watched Clueless together. And it was just one Jane Austen thing after another, and one tea thing. I don't think that time I made people tea, but I know around that time I started making tea and baking scones to the best of my ability, and making my version of cream until I could get hold of clotted cream for people. So people would come over, and it was like, well, Catherine's making tea. We're taking tea with Catherine. Not that they said that yet back then, but that's how it started, really. And that was really 1995. Both things. Even though I started reading Jane Austen a little earlier, and I started getting into tea a little earlier, that's when I really got into it. And then I guess in early 96, I believe, again, I went to see Sense and Sensibility in the theater. And who did I take with me? My dad. And he went with me. I'm pretty sure it was the same day, but I could be getting it mixed up. Well, let's pretend it was the same day because it would make sense. I went with my dad to Tea and Sympathy. I took everybody I could to Tea and Sympathy, and I still do now. And this is not a paid advertisement for Tea and Sympathy, but if you are in New York and you need to have a little bit of an experience of British tea time, definitely look it up. It's a fun place. And my dad went with me, and I know y'all don't know my dad, except my sister, if she's watching, and I'm sure she is. Hi, Bonnie. If you knew my dad, he did not like going out to eat. He hated going out to restaurants with wait service. He could deal with diners, some fast food, but he just hated the fuss. I guess, everybody's got something they're not into. And, but he came with me to Tea and Sympathy. He had quiche, and he had apple crumble, and he loved it. And, I never got to go with him to England or Scotland, where his father was from, and I would have liked to have done both, but it didn't happen, but I came close enough. And so that was just a little bit of the origin story of taking tea with Catherine. And I'm interested in your origin story. If you ever, if you have a channel and you ever have a story about your interest in those similar things or something in that line, please let me know. Or if you want to tell your story in the comments, please feel free to do so. I'd love to hear anything that, that got you into anything. Freddie, well, not into Freddie, but, you're welcome to love Freddie as well. I know he's not in the camera right now. Orange cat. And let me know if you were around in 95 and you remember any of the big Jane Austen releases. And if I forgot anything, I probably did. There's probably something that I forgot about, but that's okay because it's 30 years ago. Oh my goodness. Anyway, that is all for now. I think I've spoken enough. My cat is about to eat me alive, but I hope you've enjoyed my ramble, my chat tea time. Until next time, this is Catherine at Taking Tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea and Jane Austen filled day. Bye.